Okay, so topic for today, we'll go into additional drills beyond what was on the jump drills for all athletes. And then we will address one of my favorite topics, which is steering. All right, so before we go on, we're talking a little bit about it, but anything on that jump drills for all athletes? I know I opened it up last week for questions, but we'll talk about some additional drills beyond skipping, run, jumps, and galloping. So I want to make sure that if there's any questions on those on the front end, give you a chance to ask those.
I guess I'm just kind of curious. So skipping, I would agree, is probably the easiest one to start. What do you do typically, Rob? Do you do that for like a week or two and then progress to gallops first and then bounds, or what?
Yeah, so skipping is typically, it'll be within our warm up, and then it'll be like kind of a skip for height and skip for distance are kind of an entry level, like high intensity plyo for us. And then with gallops and run jumps, I've done it both ways, where I've done gallops first, which I think is easier, and then progressed into run jumps, which usually take a lot more time, and there's a lot more that you can do with it. I've also started with run jumps, and there were some growing pains there at first, but then getting that out of the way in a way at the beginning of the year was also kind of helpful. So I've done both ways with that progression, and I think there's positives and negatives of both. So yeah, I think what I would tend to do is go for like a week with gallops, just to skips are pretty regular, but then I would go gallops, really focusing in on the good rolling contact to start, and then progress into the run jumps. And then I usually just cycle through. So like, for after we learn them, I'll go through, and maybe we'll spend a few weeks where we're focusing, 2-3 weeks where the focus is maybe on gallops, and then we'll come back to the run jumps. So just to kind of keep things fresh, we'll toggle it as we go. But I'd say we never really get away from any of those for too long. All right, so I have an article linked here by Mario Gomez. That's great. I think I may have mentioned it in one of our earlier sessions, but in that one, he talks about skipping and galloping. So it's a really good resource. He goes through he breaks down, I think it has like 3 5-minute videos at least, where he's going through one of his athletes, rolling through it. So I strongly encourage that read. It's one of my favorites for sure. A couple things in regards to the jump drill for all athletes. One thing I want to emphasize in terms of just programming, which we'll dive into quite a bit next session, but it's just the general intensity fluctuations. So, in theory, you can do galloping and run jumps every day. If you're in a traditional, maybe like high-low structure, you could do run jumps where they're doing that with a high intensity on Monday, and then you come back on Tuesday and maybe they gallop, or maybe they skip, or they do run jumps, but it's just at a lower intensity where you're really focusing on the foot contact and the rhythm. So a lot of times that's just going to be part of what those drills will be part of what we do for a warm-up, and it'll be reflected upon the intensity target for the day. So we're doing those pretty regularly. We tend to have a program warm-up where everybody's doing similar things to start, and then if they break off and I have jumpers that day, maybe we'll go into a continuation of a warm-up where we're rocking through those drills. So that's kind of how I utilize them, and I just match it with the intensity that we're working for the day for the most part. Obviously, we could maybe start off with a lower intensity and build up if we're going to do something high intensity. Sometimes they'll be ready to roll, and we'll jump right into something that's pretty high intensity. But that's just one thing. The intensity can fluctuate with the basis of the intensity for that day. Since its creation, so I made that, it was a COVID project for me in like Marchish of 2020. One thing that I started doing last season that was effective was making sure that I target the individual athlete a little bit more with those drills. So if I have a jumper, for instance, a long jumper whose angle is a little bit too high, he's projecting himself a little bit too high up in the air. When we're focused in on skipping or galloping or run jumping, I'm going to encourage him to have a flatter angle, where he's pushing. So it's just going to be focusing more on pushing back as a pushing down to go up. All right, just to wire that in the best I can. So it's just an opportunity to kind of rehearse that. So I would let that athlete know, hey, your focus is to push back, to project yourself forward when we do these drills. All right, versus, maybe you have that traditional kind of line drive kid with long jump. So there I would encourage, more of a focus of pushing down to go up. Then there's things we could talk about also depending on the reason why that athlete maybe isn't getting enough height on long jump. So we could get into maybe a penultimate conversation and things of that nature, but I try to really just be as specific as possible with those. For a high jumper, I'll mix in, if it's just a high jumper, I'll mix in some where they're going to do things for distance, just because I think it's good to be exposed to, different stimuli. But the focus there would be more of a projection up. A triple jumper, if it was just a triple jumper, I would probably focus more on that more horizontal emphasis. So that's one thing, just really targeting it for the athlete, I think can be helpful. I really like the asymmetric work. So both with skipping and bounding, I'll show a video of that, but it's just really emphasis. The emphasis is like high intensity on one side. So with maybe the left leg, and then going easy on the right. I find that to be really helpful for athletes who are struggling with that drill, just to focus in on one side and get a good quality push on the one side. So it's kind of a regression of sorts, I think, but it's worked really well. And then we utilize a lot more crescendo work. So starting off within a single rep and doing a lower intensity and progressing up as you go. So that really kind of locks in some of the contacts that we're looking for at a lower intensity, and then they can continue that on as they progress through the drill as the intensity gets higher. So I got two examples of those. So this is an asymmetric one right here. For those of you that are from the South, that white stuff on the ground is called snow. We might be getting some of that early. Well, what? Can't play. That's not good. Interesting. Let's try this one. Let's see. QuickTime not available. Well, this is tragic. All right. Plan B. Always have a plan B, right? Let's see what I can do. Or
Was it the asymmetric skipping at the top, Rob?
yeah, that was the one. Let's see. That'll come through. There we go. So keep in mind at this time, I think I was 39 years old. So easy on the judging. But you'll notice with the left, I'm going to be pushing harder. You can see the bigger extension there in the asymmetric skip. And then the right, I'm not pushing really hard at all. So I'll just often cue like big push, small push, big push, small push. You guys could probably come up with maybe some better cues than that, but that's essentially what we're looking at there for an asymmetric skip. Again, I think if you have an athlete who's just really for the skipping, it works well. Once an athlete knows how to skip, it's usually not a problem to like they don't have to necessarily regress back to the asymmetric skip. I just think it's a nice sort of change of pace. But where I've really probably seen the biggest benefits is in bounding. So athletes who just maybe don't have the physical capability to bound yet, with the alternate legs, it works really well. So that's probably where I've seen the biggest benefit there. All right, and then I was looking for crescendo bound, and they named it bounding crescendo. So this is a nice one. So they're starting off at a low intensity, and they progress into just going into a higher intensity. So I often know, like, I categorize them by, like, I call it the phases of life. So like baby bounds, toddler bounds, child bounds, teenage bounds, athletic prime bounds. So then I'll give them that kind of age range. You could also do percentages, obviously, but kind of up to you there. But you can just see it as they go there, they're just gradually increasing the intensity. So this was, I think maybe we started at like 50% and worked our way up to like 75 within the same rep. Again, I like it just because it allows the athletes to dial in specific contact items that we may be looking for, and then just progress into the intensity moving forward. All right. So types of bounding, now that we're there. All right. Again, I have a spectrum of it where we'll go sub-max to max. And again, we talked about this the other day. Depending on the group that you're working with, you may have a wide range. And if you have athletes who have a low training age, they can be doing more of like the baby bounds, while the older athletes are getting after it with some higher intensity bounds. I'm still going to give those younger athletes the opportunity to, when we bound for distance or my contact grid and we try to get a power metric out of that, I'll give them that opportunity to show that, to see if they're there yet. But, if they're going to get results from a lower intensity, I think that's something that we should take advantage of, because once they're exposed to that high intensity, where do you go from there? So you want to give them, make sure you give them a stimulus that they're going to get adaptation from. And that way, when they move forward, they can maximize that bigger stimulus. So you don't want to rob them of that too early. The two types that I really focus in on in regards to bounding would be your traditional power bound, which is a double arm action for us. And we're going to be looking at a rolling contact with the foot. And then just the speed bound, where the foot contact, again, I talk a lot about the foot contact, but with the speed bound, it's going to be more of a midfoot or like ball of the foot contact. Okay. And there we'll go with a single arm action. Okay. And then we mix in some variety just to kind of develop robustness. So we look at triplanar action. So we'll do items that are lateral, 45-degree angles on a curve, that kind of thing. All right, so I got a couple examples of that. Hopefully those work. We'll see. Measuring distance and time, I think, is awesome to just increase intent. So a simple tape measure works, right? And you can do a standard like bound. You're going to have 6 bounds. Let's see how far you can go. This link here, the Frank Dick charts, it correlates bound performance with like a target time for the 100, I believe, and the 200. So they're kind of cool if you want to check those out. But it can kind of give you an idea of where the athletes should be in regards to a sprint race. Not perfect, but they work pretty well, and it just kind of, again, makes a connection. So you can tell a kid, hey, this bounding performance says that you can run a 10.9, so that's what you're capable of. So that can be helpful for motivation purposes. We've also set up like free lap and timing gates for speed bounds, just to add an intent. I have the contact grid where I can collect power. So anything that you can do to increase intent is obviously huge. And, it's no different than timing sprints, right? I mean, so if you can attach that to your bounding, that's awesome. All right. The thing that we really got to keep in mind as we bound is what's going to make it the most intense is the velocity that you're moving at. So when we first start off bounding, we'll often go from like just an initial velocity when the bounding begins, maybe just like a little bit of a jog in, a few steps, and then that intensity is kind of low. But then we might go into where we're giving up to like 6 pretty hard steps going into the bounding, or 8 hard steps going into the bounding for an advanced athlete, and that's going to create bigger ground reaction forces. Okay, so that's one thing just to keep in mind when you're asking athletes to bound. That horizontal velocity that they're carrying is what's going to really drive the intensity. As that velocity increases, I'm still going to tell the athletes the same thing that I do when we're doing like the baby bounds. I constantly say, push the bounds vertical. So I'm trying to get them to focus in on pushing down to go up within those bounds. And as that horizontal velocity increases, it's the same thing. All right. Because it's going to be hard for them to do that. Anyone who's triple jumped before, the first phase tends to be flat, and then so it's like push back to keep that flat, but then those last 2 you're trying to rise up, so you got to push down to go up, the second and third phase. So that's kind of what we're mimicking there with that idea of pushing the bound vertical. One soapbox thing that I have as a track coach, I guess, the standing triple jump's a very popular jump drill. I don't like it for track and field. At least for jumpers, because everything that we talk about is posture related. And when you watch the standing triple jump drill, it's fantastic for acceleration, right? It's great. But I don't want my jumpers connecting the standing triple jump with how they feel there, where their angle is going to be, when they exit that first jump, they're going to be there, maybe at a 45-ish degree angle. And they're going to be in an acceleration kind of position for most of that drill. I don't want them, if they have a chance to triple jump down the road, I don't want them to connect that with triple jump. So I like everything with triple jump in general. To me, it's just like posture preservation. I don't want that connection going on at all between the standing triple jump and the actual triple jump. So that's just one soapbox thing I have that I try to stay away from. For sprinters, I totally get it. Team sport athletes, totally get it. I would use it. I would measure the crap out of that. I would use it all the time if I was coaching football. But for a jumper who may have to triple jump down the road, again, I just try to avoid that connection. So that's just me. Oh man! All right. So here I'll go into. Frustrating. It was working this morning. All right. We'll go bounding. Okay, here's a speed bound. Just so we see, and you can kind of see the athlete's foot contact here. That's really what I would focus in on, kind of that forefoot contact. So his heel, and most of these is actually not hitting the ground. Definitely a big drill that even our sprinters do. If you've seen the presentations that Ken Clark has given, one of the key components of speed is that angle, the thigh split when you're at maximum vertical projection. So how big of an angle can you get and how fast you can close that back is one of the key determinants of speed. So the speed bound is a great option for that. If I had an athlete who was more long jump based, we would probably focus more on the speed bound than the power bound, to be honest. Obviously, they would get doses of both, but it would be maybe a little bit more biased to the speed bound. For the triple jump, the high jump, I would probably bias more towards the power bound. Okay. And then a power bound. Got too many videos in here. So here, just again, want to emphasize the heel toe contact that's occurring here within the power bound. So here, a few steps going into it. He's really doing a pretty good job of pushing the vertical. Another thing that I'll look for when watching bounding is just, again, that shin position that we talked about before with like the long jump. So when he's at full support, we should see that, should be pretty close to perpendicular, or maybe slightly ahead with the power bound. But there you can see at full support, he's pretty close to perpendicular. That was like a really good stop. That probably won't ever happen again. So that gives you a good idea that he's in a pretty good position to push well. All right. All right. And then at this one, I think I actually already showed, but it's just an example of a linear diagonal bound. That quick. So just some variety there. So pushing out with the left a little bit there. Really good one to get to the ball, the big toe, and then a linear style with that right. So some good variety there. Still that one from Dan Fichter. One that's hard for athletes to coordinate. So it's a good coordination challenge, but also good for athletes who struggle to get to the ball, the big toe, both on the right and the left, because when you're coming back on that right foot, you're trying to push it in the opposite direction that you're going. So you still got to roll through to the ball, the big toe, to get moving straight forward. So that's a nice one there that we utilize periodically. All right. That's fast forwarding to what we got moving forward. Okay. Landing drill. I'm going to close this thing down and restart it. Let's see if that will get this working. So my apologies for the technical difficulty. Let's see. Wow. Okay. Fortunately, I have a pretty good idea of where all these are at. So with the landing, ball landing drill, one that I like is, so if you go to the slide beyond this here, I took this style of drill from this video from Cameron Gary. So it's just a landing drill progression where he uses a chair into a sand pit. Now, what I didn't like about that is, like, when we're indoors, opening our sand pit is actually like a hassle. There's a ton of sections. It takes a long time. And then there's like a lip, so the chair doesn't work all that well in it. And then outdoors, in April, it's just, how often is our pit actually usable? So I was looking for something that would be a little bit more accessible. So this ball landing drill worked pretty well for us this year. And it was totally random. I was having athletes use the chair on the high jump pit because our long jump pit was not accessible because of weather. And we had, a kid was just like, there has to be something better than using this high jump pit because the chairs were kind of hitting them in the head when they were going forward. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. And then the next day it was crappy weather out, and we ended up in like I don't know, I think it's our cheerleading room, but there were a ton of exercise balls. And I was like, whoa, we could use these, and I just bought a few exercise balls, and we started doing this pretty regularly. So they were just able to do this on field turf. They kind of sit with the ball, so the impact of their butt on the ground isn't bad. But they're going to start off in this position here. They'll sweep through and extend out, and then they're going to bring their butt to their heels. So it's pretty identical to the action that would take place in a landing. Okay. So that's the ball landing. I used to not do that very often. We incorporated that a lot into our pre-practice this year, and it worked really well. So athletes who were struggling with landing mechanics would show up, and the first thing they would do is just work on the ball landing. It worked really well. I think last week I talked a little bit about infinity locomotion. So here it is. You got a couple athletes who are set up for that. So a couple different variations with that. Make it a little bit bigger here. One athlete has the water bag just to make each step different with water sloshing around. Another one is banded, so it's just providing some assistance, resistance. He's also doing some halos with the ball over his head. So we're just kind of trying. This is again one of the first things that they would do. So just trying to stimulate the vestibular system really a little bit here. What you'll also see is there is a cone that they are focused in on. So this is what I would cue with this is we're keeping a level head like we would in a normal approach, but we're keeping our eyes on that cone just to work on the convergence divergence component of vision. So the figure 8 pattern just kind of stimulates, like I said, the vestibular system and your visual system. You're just going to be kind of working through different patterning. So it's just something to kind of wake the body up a little bit. Again, the book that's from is called Infinity Walk. Our athletes really like this. Some people would probably argue like, oh, that's BS. Like, why are you doing that stuff? But like at the end of the day, they're skipping and we're incorporating vision. I don't see any harm in doing the drill. They like it. And I think we at some point have to train vision in some way, shape, or form because it's huge. And this is just a simple way. It was a simple way for us to incorporate it. So normally the Infinity Walk, it would be more lateral. I just thought this was more connected with long jump. So the creator of the drill or the exercise may think that would be a poor representation, but it worked for us pretty well, I think. So something that'll be a keeper. All right. Anti-penultimate. So the step before the penultimate step. This was one that we worked through quite a bit this year. I had more athletes than in years past that were line drivers. So this athlete in particular really never jumped more than 19 feet prior to this year and ended up close to 23. And it was his speed was there to early on to be a 21 plus, but he could just never project himself up into the air. And we did this drill, but with our structure with COVID this past season, we had this pre-practice time. So this is something that he did hundreds of times. And I think it helped carry over. How much I don't know, but it was one where all of a sudden he was jumping up into the air. He was projecting himself in the air, and he made some significant progress. So it was really cool to see. So a pretty simple drill. This athlete jumps off his right foot, so his right foot's going to hit up on top of the box. Then his penultimate left comes down, and then he jumps off his right. So that's all that's happening there. So what this does is just gives the athlete that feeling of the hips sinking on the penultimate into takeoff. And I mean, that's really the purpose of the drill, is to just kind of get that fluctuation where there's a bit of a dip down to then help yourself project up. That's all. That box is about 4 inches off the ground. This is literally the probably the one that I have the most videos for, and obviously the computer's being a little difficult. Suspended 1-2 is a great one for triple jump. So with triple jump, the big thing that I like focusing in on is hip displacement in the first phase, the extension of the swing leg coming down in the flight of the first phase, and then a rolling contact heading into the second phase. That's like 90% of the faults that you're going to find with a novice triple jumper, in my opinion. So this one toggled with actual phase work where you're, maybe just doing the first phase or first into second works really well. And it really fast tracked progress for our triple jumpers. So I stole this from Joey Pacioni, and it's been really helpful. I'd say maybe the biggest game changer for us in regards to our triple jumping. So, all right. There it is. So that's the hip displacement, something that we need in all the jumps. So I think there could be an argument here that this could be something that we would look for in, obviously long in triple a little bit with high, but getting that hip displacement where that foot's on the ground and the hips are in front. So getting that first to start. Then what'll happen next, this leg, the swing leg, we need that to extend underneath. So what we're looking for ideally with posture here is the knees to meet directly underneath the hips. We want it to be just straight up and down. So the knees are meeting and it's just a straight line from head to the toe down here or heel down here. So that's kind of what we're after with this one. So as the knees come by and pass each other, not fast enough there. Okay, they should be meeting directly underneath the hips. All right. That will help preserve posture. What you'll typically see with a novice triple jumper is the knees will meet out in front. And when the knees are out in front, the reaction is the torso is going to rotate forward. Okay. So we want those knees to meet in flight of that first phase. And in order for that to happen, that swing leg needs to extend. And then here, just heel toe. So he kind of dips down. These hurdles were probably a little bit too high for him, but that's okay. But heel toe contact coming back down on their right foot. All right. So a lot of times athletes will kind of panic. And when you panic, it's just like when you go downstairs, the first part of your foot that you want to touch is that the ball of your foot. You want to know where you're at in space. So you'll often see athletes who are new to triple jump coming down into the beginning of the second phase, they're going to toe bash, okay, because they're freaked out. All right, so we want to try to wire in that heel toe contact as much as we can. And what else will help them not freak out about that? Continuing to do the different drills that we've talked about already. Bounding, galloping, run, jumps, etc. Okay. So serpentine and curve runs. Another one that I will have, I mean, it's primarily a high jump type drill, but it would be one that I think is good for everybody. So I would have even our long and triple jumpers do this. Works really well if you have access to a football field. This is a setup that you can roll with. So you just got, your 5-yard lines, cones here. And then I usually go about 10 yards, but you can vary that distance and they're just going to work their way through that in a serpentine style. I talk about going at high jump velocity, having big arms all the way through. A lot of times an issue with high jump is as they get closer and closer to the bar, they start to tense up. And that's really common with long and triple as well. But with high, we definitely want to maintain nice big arm action all the way through takeoff. And then outward foot pressure is a big one that we'll talk about. So if you look at this wonderful diagram over here, this athlete would be what I would call having a real lean. All right, so this square is obviously the athlete's foot, okay? And then there will be, there's going to be the bend at the ankle there, and it should just be a straight line from that ankle through their head. That's a real lean. What you get from athletes when you tell them that they need to have a lean in high jump is this, where they're just kind of curved and their waist sticks out a little bit. They might have a little bit of a lean, but they're just actually bending their upper body. Or they just go like this with their neck and they think they're leaning. All right, so we want that real lean. The real lean is going to create that outward foot pressure. Okay, so an easy thing to do is have an athlete, have them partner up, where one athlete's standing to the side with the hand on the shoulder, and then just have that athlete who has the hand on the shoulder back away and have the other athlete lean into them. And then they'll feel when they're on that one leg, let's just say it's the leg that is further away from the person who's holding them, they'll feel that outward pressure. Okay, so like if I had my right leg on the ground, I would feel that outward pressure on the outer part of my foot. And then I would have the athlete switch legs and say, okay, now put your left leg down. And then they'll feel that actually on the inner part of their leg, but that's still going out away from the center of the curve. So that's what we mean by outward foot pressure. Any questions on that? I do an okay job explaining that. Okay, so here, just a serpentine run, nothing too special. You can work through at different velocities. So the more that you have a bigger distance between the cones, the faster the athlete can obviously go. But you can, again, just vary it up. All right. So when I was talking about like the outward foot pressure, here as the athlete's right foot comes down, he should feel pressure moving this way. And then same as the left foot comes down on that part of the curve, they should also feel pressure moving out this way. What I like about the serpentine runs over the just doing runs on a curve is they have to consistently toggle and initiate the curve as opposed to just being on the curve and it's just consistent throughout. I mean, we still do those, but if I had to preference which one I think is better, I would say the serpentine run would be better. Okay, so kind of taking that one step further, curve initiation for high jump. This is one that can be rehearsed. Whether you, a lot of complaints I get is like, we're not able to high jump until April or whatever, until we can go outside. But if you can get some gym space, you don't even need a high jump pit. You can work this drill. Even if you were in a cafeteria, you could work this drill. So you can see here that I have a curve kind of drawn in. So this yellow one here is kind of the one that they're following. And that's where the curve would start. This athlete has a 10-step approach. So there's going to be 5 steps prior to the start of the curve. And they're just going to rehearse the initiation of the curve. So most curve-related issues that I find are just poor initiation. So that first step into the curve is what's poor. So what the cues for the athlete in this drill would be, in a 10-step approach, we're going to have them push to vertical in 3. So they're practicing their drive phase for their high jump approach. On push off of 4, they're going to begin to lean in a little bit. And then the 5th step is the big one. That 5th step, we want to establish that lean a little bit by that foot, the right foot, you'll see will track out here. So kind of like outside the curve. So you can keep an eye on that. And then the 6th will come back into the line of travel. We are not looking for like the post route, where it's like just a jagged, just like a diagonal. But that in order to kind of get that lean established, that 5th will have to go outside a little bit. So we'll do this both on the track or on the runway. Like I said, you can do it. You can just set up cones here. that I'll show that in another one. But that this is something that has been pretty helpful for our athletes. So get this one going. So watch, there's 3 here, 4, he starts his lean a little bit, and then 5 is going to track a little bit out, and then he's in his lean. Okay, so that's pretty close to what we're looking for there in that drill. That's a second step, third, fourth, he's leaning a little bit, fifth tracks a little bit out, and you can see that establishes that lean, and he's back on track on the curve. Okay, so whether it's with the right or the left, again, I talked about that idea of outward pressure. The outward pressure there is on the left. Here, the outward pressure would be going this way, moving forward. Okay. So they didn't even jump here. There's no bar or anything set up there. I just had this kind of generic curve set up, and that's what we were looking at. I don't even think our pits were out at that point, to be honest. With this one, it's the same thing. I'm just showing how I won't show the video, but I just took 5 steps back. So this is like the initiation of the curve back here. I'm using a soccer circle. So you can, we do this in our infield too, where we use the soccer circle. But from the part of the circle here, I'm just tracking straight back 5 steps. I mark it. So I have these marks out here, and then I would go back and do the same thing. So, it doesn't have to necessarily be something where you're using the athlete's specific approach to get them to get that concept of that 5th step kind of tracking out to establish the lead. Any questions there? Okay. All right. Short approach work, obviously that's going to be something that is a big component of what we do. Whether we're looking at for long jump, your runoffs, or which is just basically like a gallop into the pit, or jumps, triple jump doing different phase work. So first phase, first and second phase, all 3 phases, maybe the second and third phase. All right. And then for high jump, either like scissor or layout. So this is just some general guidelines for short approach work that I utilize. At the beginning of the season, we'll start with a shorter step range, and we'll gradually go back as time goes on. One thing with high jump that I want to emphasize is we never mix full and short approach work. With long and triple, we rehearse the full approach. We don't ever really jump it in practice. But with high, we will jump full approach in practice. So in general, I never mix those. And the reason is, what I found is if you go from short approach work in high jump to full approach, the first full approaches are just hot garbage because the athlete's not used to the speed and they just jump right into the bar. So it's just like you're wasting a couple reps before they get acclimated to the speed. So we just keep those sessions separate. Now, that being said, if we're doing a full approach session and I just notice that it's just not there, things aren't clicking for an athlete, maybe I'll regress them back to a short approach. And going that way usually isn't as dramatic. But I know for me as a high jumper, it was pretty common to have some short approach jumps and then do some full approach jumps, and I would just jump into the bar, and that was probably why. So you just toggling that different speed is tough with the rotation. So I encourage you to keep them separate. Another big thing when you're doing short approach work that I emphasize all the time to the athletes is whatever step number we're dealing with. So if we're doing an 8-step approach, I'm going to tell them, I need you have upright posture by step 3. I need you to have upright posture by step 4. One of the most common mistakes that we'll see is the athlete will never be upright. So they're going into jump and they're leaning forward. Well, it's hard to project yourself up into the air if you're leaning forward. So we need to have that good vertical posture. So constantly telling them, hey, you need to push to vertical in this number of steps, and reminding them over and over again, and showing them video saying, hey, look at your posture here. You're leaning forward. How are you going to project yourself up into the air? Is definitely helpful. When I do circuit work and things like that, which we'll go into next time, that's something that I'll write down. So they'll have signs where they're going to different stations, and I will make sure that they read that. They need that reminder because they forget. Because they think when they're doing a 10-step approach, or even let's just say an 8-step approach, they think that their start should be the same as it is when they're doing a full approach. So, they're not. They may be pushing to vertical in 6, but that's just not enough time to target well, and it's not enough time to get in a good posture to project yourself into the air. All right, target practice, one of my favorites. So if you ever listen to Just Fly Sports podcast, you hear Joel Smith cite the Ruzon study every other episode. But I think it is important. It's a really good one. So this study showed that athletes who were asked to vary the intensity of their jumps in long jump versus athletes who were just asked to go maximal all the time, the variance group, the ones that varied their intensity, actually ended up jumping further. So I just find that interesting, and this adds a little game kind of component to it. So really simple, you could have athletes go through doing short approach work and say, you're going to land where the blue cone is on these 2 reps, and then you're going to land on the red cone, and then you're going to land on the yellow cone. So a very simple way to kind of toggle intensity, really great for sub-max kind of days. So that's something that we'll utilize. I make it a little bit more interesting where they're running down the runway, and then I'll call out a color, and they have to figure out how to get to it. They love it. They think it's hysterical. So I call out blue, and then the athlete hits the yellow, and everyone's laughing at them, so, they get competitive with it. It just makes it a little bit more interesting.
Hey, Rob, can I went in from your, 3-4 years ago now at a track and football consortium? You did had them run backwards and did a clap.
Yeah, we're going to go through that.
Oh, man. My kids love, you're going to get to that one?
Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to say it. They love it. I'll absolutely agree with you on that.
Yeah. Cool. So then this is something I did a couple times last year. So when you're dealing with a wide range of athlete abilities, obviously there's the component of continual progress for all athletes, and hopefully they're feeling good about themselves. But I think it can be a little bit of a struggle at times for the younger athletes when they see, a kid that's doing short approach work and they're hitting close to 20 feet. And then you got that freshman that's just hitting 12. That can be a little bit discouraging, So I created a little rubric that I'll just assign some grades on, and I won't have distance as a component to it. So it really just makes them dial in on the start, the approach, board accuracy, takeoff, etc. So and I'll just kind of grade them. Now, obviously, I can't see all of that at once, so maybe I'm going to focus in on a couple items. Maybe I'll have another athlete grade, an honest athlete grade their board accuracy, so they're not lying about where their teammates hit the board or something like that. But I'll just grade them, and then we'll total it up at the end of the session, and it gives that athlete who's jumping 12 feet a chance to be the winner, so something to just kind of improve by and keeps them competitive on maybe a sub-max kind of day, and really causes them to not just focus in on the distance, but components that would hopefully lead to bigger distances moving forward. Steering drills. So part 2 here. Steering drills in general, I think the ability to interpret space is huge. And I think I've mentioned before, like athletes who tend to play ball sports, I've noticed have better tracking and just ability to steer. When you have like that track only kid, it's something that they can struggle with. So I try to bring kind of the field sport concept here with to the long, the triple, the high jump, and get them to interpret space a little bit more. So when we look at 2017 Worlds at data, the takeoff loss, so how far back the average was that they took off from the foul line was 5 or 6 centimeters, which is pretty remarkable for an average. If you looked at that for high school, I mean, where would that be? It'd be way bigger. It'd be all over the place, I'm sure. So that frequency would be a struggle. So we want to try to get it to be, get them to be as accurate as possible. All right. So one thing that's very simple is just random hurdle spacing. You can set up a distance however long you want, put hurdles in random spots, and have them steer so they're not stuttering over the hurdles. They can be short hurdles, so there's no intimidation factor of tripping over them. They can gallop over it if it's short enough, right? They don't have to actually go through like traditional hurdle form. And the very simple rule is no stuttering. So it's like, I don't care how slow you go, just don't stutter. And then as time goes on, they'll get more confident and they'll pick up their speed, but still no stuttering. Figure out what leg you got to jump off of. And it's just going to be constant repetition of getting them to interpret where they're at in space. And you just switch where the hurdles are. You move a couple hurdles up, move a couple hurdles back. You change that each rep and challenge them that way. So Joe, you mentioned the out and back on a clap. This is a big one that we use. The athletes love it. So they'll start at the board, they'll run away from the pit. And we have managers. For some reason, we have people who just want to hang around and be at practice and help out. It's awesome. Like, I think we're going to have like 7 of them this year. So I'll just have the manager decide like when to clap. The athlete turns around and they try to get a fair jump in. It's also funny because you can see who the managers have like a vendetta against, because you got the kid running all the way down the runway before the manager claps. So I usually have to give some guidelines there, but sometimes they deserve it though. So here it is with a high jump. So pretty straightforward. We obviously utilize that for long and triple as well on the horizontal runway. You'll notice here I have two crossbars set up. This is just to try to encourage the athlete to continue to lean away from the bar. So we'll talk more about that in a high jump technique session. But I found, this is the bar that they're jumping over, the green one there. Having this here just helps them maintain that lean away from the bar to get proper rotation over the bar. So they have a lean away as they get into their plant there. So that's one constraint that we'll place that works really well. All right, some other high jump options. I call this one just random spot and small clearance. Oh man. One of those days. So he literally, we picked a random spot for him to go from. It was in line with how far out he should be, but it was just like pick a random spot between these 2 cones. So he did, and then it was get a jump in. But instead, so kind of like the Ruzon study here, instead of trying to clear the bar as much as possible, I said, I want you to get as close to the bar as possible when you clear it. So again, just kind of dialing in kind of their awareness, I think, is something that's often overlooked. And It's just that, it was a different challenge. She looked at me like I was crazy. Like, you want me to come close to hitting the bar? I said, yes. So he obviously had to kind of dial it down a little bit to get to his left, but that's one variation we have. Okay, and then I think on the same day we tried this one. I'm still not sure if this is trash or good. So you guys can you can try it out and let me know if it works for you. But instead of using the other crossbar as a constraint, you can see I put this. I always talked about like wanting high jump mats that I could stack on top of each other to encourage the athlete to go up as opposed to going into the bar. And then this was just laying on the side of the high jump pit for some reason that day. And I was just like, oh, well, that's kind of like what I've always said I wanted. So let's try it. So for this kid, I think it did a pretty good job of getting him to go up. We had to work on where to place it a little bit more. I also didn't want him to land on it, obviously. So just having that there, I think there might be something there. You can try that one out. See if it works for you. All right. So just some quick steering drills. The plus or minus 3. You would set the short approach mark. So here we actually run back. Like if we're doing 6 steps, the athletes either know what their 6-step number is after a while, or we'll run it back. And then every rep, I just challenge them by saying, hey, you're going to, from your mark, move back 2, move up 3. We're just changing it up. One, it gets them to kind of consider like how long they need to push for, possibly. So like, maybe they need to push an extra step or something like that. And then, yeah, it just gets them. Sometimes it actually works really well. Like I tell them, all right, move 3 feet back, and then they push harder. And then it's like, oh, you see, you could actually push harder. You made that no problem. You didn't reach. So make sure you're pushing harder. So that's one reason why I like to use that. And you can use that with high jump, obviously, as well. You would just move the high jumper forward or back with that one. Random in a range, you'll start at a random spot between 2 cones. So that's what we did with the high jump drill there. So like on a horizontal runway, maybe from the board, I put a cone at 30 feet and 50 feet. It's like start anywhere between those 2 cones, get a fair jump in. Before I forget, the steering stuff, it's like 10% of what we might do. Maybe, we might do this just like on one day, or it's just a fun way to end a session. It's this idea, right? I'm trying to increase variance, but the reality is we're dealing with high school kids, and there's variance in every attempt anyway, because they're just, they're novice jumpers. So they're getting variance each rep, no matter what. This is just kind of taking it to a different level and making it kind of fun, creating a little bit of a game. All right. So the 3-cone start, this is one that I roll with quite a bit. So maybe I have a cone at 40, 45, and 50 feet. The reason why I typically use like 5 to 6 feet as the distance between is that's going to be about an average stride length. So it's going to challenge them to either figure out how they're going to get to their jumping leg, or, do they just have to go off the other leg? So I'll have them go like, maybe if it was 40, 45, 50, they'll do one at 40, one at 45, one at 50, and then cycle back and do that a few times. The mystery takeoff, one of my favorites. Okay, so the jumper will be cued which leg to take off as they're working their way down to the runway. So I will either say right or left, or I'll hold up an arm and they have to jump off of that. So if I like hold this arm up, I'm holding up my left right now, they would jump off their right. Or I'll really screw them up and challenge them, and I hold up this one, and then I say, you have to jump off the opposite one. Okay. So visual or audio. And I usually give them enough time to react to it. So I'll put a cone for me down so I know like when I need to cue them by. So usually about 25 feet from the board, or the 20-foot, 4-foot board for triple works pretty well. Actually, I know I lied. That's like the middle boards would be good if you're dealing with a 12-foot board. So anyway, that's usually what I'll roll with for that one. And I got an example of one that I incorporate kind of a lot of the different stuff for that one. High jump freestyle. So this is something that all jumpers really like doing. One for high jump, I like to, like if we're doing short approach work, and let's just say that they take 10 jumps short approach wise off their left leg. I like for them to go to the other side at some point during the session, and it can be kind of staggered, and maybe jump off their right for another, 5 or 6 jumps. So it can be just like maybe they do 2 off their left, and then they're going to do 1 off their right, just to kind of keep things balanced. And again, a coordination challenge a little bit. I do not make them lay out off that opposite leg unless they're really comfortable with it. They can just like do a scissor kick with it. That's fine. But the freestyle one is just, hey, we're going to put the bar up and you can jump off whatever leg you want, and you can jump over the bar any style you want. So it just gives them a little bit of creativity. And, we see some interesting things over the bar. A lot of times what it also does is everyone else on the team sees that we're having fun just jumping onto the high jump mat. And then you see this kid that comes out of nowhere, and it's like, hey, you could probably be a high jumper, so just a fun thing to consider there. So some hybrids, kind of combining a lot of these different concepts. So one here that I got, I think that this will close it out. Again, thank you for your patience today. Sorry about the PowerPoint being silly. We had network issues. We had no internet at school on Monday. 0 internet. It was actually pretty awesome, to be honest. It was great. No one could be on their phone. Like, it was just a total dead zone. So this actually has quite a bit of stuff on it. So starting off with some triple jump stuff, and then gets into that mystery takeoff that we'll look at. So here, just some triple jump. That little box there works really well for the first phase to get them to extend the free leg. Little obstacle heading into the second phase. We'll talk more about this with the triple jump technique stuff. I think it was pretty good. He was super competitive, so he just out jumped everybody by like 2 feet there. So this is combining the Ruzon one. I'm giving them a target and then holding up my hand for which leg they're supposed to jump off of. So that's just that quick example there. The other thing with that one is, what was I going to say? The hurdles that you saw on that were put there just so they don't run through. So when we do that, the drill with where they have the mystery takeoff, a lot of times when they end up doing that, they're not comfortable and they'll just run through. So then I just put up 2 12-inch hurdles, and then they have to jump. For the most part, they're not going to run into hurdles. So that worked pretty well to kind of make sure that they actually get the jump in. All right. So that's all the drills that I think possibly think of. So then the next 2 sessions, what we'll focus in on is kind of how to put all this stuff together, and then look at some technical components. Any questions before we part ways?
It's all good stuff again, Rob. I've got maybe kind of the same question. You ever use any springboards before? I've experimented. I don't like the over rotation that they get, but it's kind of fun to give some kids some flight time.
I am no longer recording, so if you want to talk. I think, Joe, you might be saying something, but I'm not sure.
Oh, sorry, it was maybe breaking up. Kind of the same question. Number one, you ever use any springboards? I've used them a little